I think is interesting about computing research is how much context shapes what we do. The sociologists have a hypothesis about this, and if you think about the history of technology, the kinds of problems on which we work are defined by available technology. So I like to say it was entirely possible to do really interesting distributed systems research in 1962. You would have just had to commandeer the computing infrastructure of multiple universities and lease some 56 kV lines from AT&T, and you could have done it. There was nothing that intellectually would have prevented you from doing it. People are really expensive, and they're getting more expensive, and our ability to develop robust software in all of the senses of the HJ I was talking about earlier is still really labor intensive. The technical challenges we're trying to solve are rising rapidly in complexity, and those of us in technical disciplines, social engineering has not historically been our forte, and yet that is one of the most important things to bring people together and find mutual reward measures. All of which means that some of our political and technical approaches have to change. And I spent a lot of time in DC wearing this and other suits, and yes, I own more than one, talking to members of Congress and funding agencies about the nature of computing research. So we've been writing Moore's Law for a long time. This is George Moore's original paper with this highly technical term, cramming more components onto integrated circuits. And all we really observed was that there were no fundamental engineering constraints for us to continue to increase transistor density. And that's what we've been doing for the last 25 years. Most people think Moore's Law means we get performance increases. Gordon never said anything about more performance. He was simply making a comment about lithography and our ability to advance that. We've been able to leverage that by building more and more complex machines. You know, Moses did not come down with a mountain with a commandment that says, "Thou shalt build file systems." There are other ways to do storage, and it does pose some interesting possibilities about what happens when you do that. But there are, for sure, a bunch of interesting questions here about memory stacking, because right now we live in a world that says DDR is the way you do it. Again, there's no diktat that it has to be that way. And it's clear if we're going to escape from surface area versus perimeter arguments and volume arguments, we're going to have to think about chip stacking because there are some practical limits on how fast we can whittle pins, and we're pretty close to it. And that's all what's driven us to Multicore. In some practical sense, it's because you're not willing to use a laptop that requires you to have a protection from the heat on your lap, and more to the point, you want the battery life to be more than 15 or 20 minutes. And that's what's driven us to Multicore. But we've been in this incredible world for the last 20, 25 years where you do nothing, and your same old software runs twice as fast in a couple of years. That's pretty incredible. But the free lunch is really over now. We get faster processors and we get larger, more complex software, which creates the demand for faster processors, and we keep riding this cycle. That slower programs create a demand for faster processors. That lets us build new software features, which demands more computing performance, and we keep riding this cycle. And we've been doing it for the last 20 years. It's an interesting kind of economic paradox associated with this, that we have for many years said, there's a price point we'll pay for a computer, and it keeps getting faster. We could have gone the other way around and say, we will keep buying cheaper computers with the same performance. But sociologically, that hasn't happened. It's starting to happen with netbooks. But the interesting question here is, to make an iteration on that cycle is a multi-billion-dollar cycle. We're not going to get faster individual cores. And if you think about what you're doing on your laptop, if I made Word 100 times faster, probably wouldn't change your life any. What's the next killer app in the consumer computing space? That's a $100 billion question. Because if we don't find one, this cycle will stop. And it's purely about economics and technology. This is a vanishingly small fraction of the people who can program, who are willing to do that. These are sort of the Marines on the beach kind of model. I mean, most people use high-level programming tools, but the truth is, the largest fraction of software developers are the people who write Python scripts or Visual Basic code, right? That's the overwhelming majority of all people on the planet who program, right? Or maybe who write Excel spreadsheet code, right? So how do we make it easy for those folks to write parallel programs on these multiple processors? That's really the practical issue. And we've been working on parallel programming for 40 years now, and we haven't found any killer solutions. When I started, I had hair. I don't anymore. I don't know if there's any cause and effect there. And the way to get lots of parallelism free is to run lots of independent applications. Right? That's the embarrassingly parallel, free notion of parallelism, and that's what cloud is giving you.